What's up, guys? I'm Laura from Reading in Bed, and this is going to be the Choose the Year tag. I don't have the prompts in front of me, so I'm just going to kind of do this in the same style that Adam from Memento Mori did, where I'm just going to kind of talk through the list rather than go through the individual prompts. I'll probably hit on the same kinds of things, though, I think. So the whole idea with this tag, which was created by Mel at Mel's Bookland Adventures, is to choose any year, a year of your choosing, and talk about books that were published that year. Now, specifically, Mel points you to a way on Goodreads where you can see the 200 most popular books that were published in any given year. And I have to think it's popular as in people adding it to Goodreads, which isn't quite the same as being popular in the year it was published, if that makes sense. But at any rate, I'll put a link below to how you can find these lists as well. And yeah, any year you want, you can see the most popular books that people are adding and reading on Goodreads, at least from books published in that year. So I am going to choose the year 2000. Eric Carl Anderson recently did a really good version of this for 1999, and I was kind of thinking about 1999, but 2000 works. Now, obviously, the year 2000 is not the year I was born, and unlike Eric, I'm not choosing it for like some sentimental or romantic reason. For him, 1999 was the year he met his partner. For me, the year 2000 was a bit of a chaotic year, you could say. I was 19 and turned 20. In the fall, I broke up with my high school boyfriend kind of in the first part of the year, started dating someone else who was really not good for me, but you know, had it been a summer romance, it would have been okay, but it dragged out a lot longer. And by the end of that year, yeah, things had really gone sour with that relationship in particular. I was partying a lot. I had transitioned from a very small sort of university situation into a very large one. So I did sort of the first 2 years of my degree at a very small school, then transferred to the U of A, you know, in the year 2000, and you know, went from like high school size type classes to the stereotypical like lecture theater with 300 people in it kind of situation. Yeah, so for me it was like there was a lot of chaos, a lot of change, and of course we didn't know it at the time, but we now look back at the year 2000 as, you know, a lot of changes happened since then, and it's kind of like this quaint and innocent time, being both sort of before the dot-com bubble and before 9/11, of course. So yeah, 2000, it is just this weird sort of it's weird to look back on it, I guess. So, but we're going to try to do that through books. So without any further ado, I will link to the list of these books from the year 2000. There's 200 of them. I'm not going to talk about all 200. And actually, I've only read 8 of them, which sort of surprised me. But let's just get started. So the number one most popular book, according to Goodreads, from the year 2000 was Angels and Demons, which was, I guess, the prequel to the Da Vinci Code, which I didn't even know. I have read the Da Vinci Code, but I didn't know there was a book before it. Apparently it's very popular. Number 2 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So I have been reading Harry Potter with my kids. Obviously I didn't read any of the books in the 90s or the aughts. But number 4, this one will be our next one, but my kids, budding book snobs that they are waiting for the deluxe illustrated edition, which is coming out in October. So I will be reading this book, just not till October. Number 3 is The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, who at the time, I don't think I knew he was Canadian, but he is Canadian, and I have read that book. I don't know when I read it. It's one of those books that like everyone has read, I think, if you were, you know, of the age to be reading such things in the early aughts. I don't really remember a lot about it. And then there's a couple I haven't read. Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. Never read any of him. Then we've got the first of several George R.R. Martin books. I think sometimes they list like multiple editions on these lists, but anyway, A Storm of Swords, No, I haven't read any of those. Then with number 6, we get to Girl with a Pearl Earring. I didn't realize it was that popular, but I guess it was one of those books that sort of everyone was reading. And I do remember that one. I remember particular scenes from that book. I really liked it. I tried one of her later books. I think it was called The Runaway or The Last Runaway, and just couldn't get into it at all. It was about Quakers or something. But yeah, Girl with the Pearl Earring, really good. And then number 7 is Confessions of a Shopaholic, the first of Sophie Kinsilla's Shopaholic books. Yes, I've read. You guys know I love Sophie Kinsilla. I've read not the whole series, but a few of them. Did I read it in the year 2000? Probably not. But probably, like in the early aughts, I want to say. And I think I liked it more than other chick lit out there. For example, Bridget Jones's Diary, stuff like that. Even I liked those, but as because I was in my early 20s, it was harder for me to relate to sort of the, oh my gosh, I'm over 30 and, I need to find a man and my career and blah, blah, blah. It was a lot easier to relate to Becky and her sort of fixating on various consumer goods and how they were going to change her life. And so I really, really liked Shopaholic. And then number 8 is Atonement by Ian McEwan, which I've read. I loved. I saw the movie. I loved it. It's been a number of years since I read that one too. The weirdest, association I have with Atonement is there's a chapter in Kelly Oxford's first book of essays where she describes something from her childhood, which is like very, very reminiscent of something that happens in Atonement, which was just like really weird. I don't know if that was on purpose, like she's a fan of the book, or maybe it's just a coincidence, but that's what I always think of when I think of Atonement, other than the movie, which, Okay, so then we're going to get into a whole bunch that I haven't read. Some of these are like YA and thrillers and stuff. Stephen King's On Writing is on here. House of Leaves is on here, which I haven't read. I did buy it as a gift from my brother, and I don't think he's read it either. So if I ever wanted to, I could just go to his house and get it. We've got some Philip Pullman. We've got The Princess Diaries. I was too old for that, of course. Kitchen Confidential. Anthony Bourdain is on here. That is something I would like to read. I haven't read a ton of cooking memoirs and stuff, but it's something I'm interested in. I want to read that new Ruth Reichel one. Is that Save Me the Plums? I'm sure the Anthony Bourdain one would be good too. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is on here. I've never read any Michael Chabon. Nicholas Sparks, haven't read. Okay, so we're down to number 18 now, and A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. So that is, I don't know where my copy is. I would really love to know. That is one of the only books on here that I'm absolutely sure that I read it in the year 2000, because I remember walking into Chapters, maybe in West Ed or, somewhere, and just seeing like a wall of this book. Like, I'm probably exaggerating in my memory, but I remember it being like the entire wall. And just, I'd never seen it before, never heard of it, but I was like, whoa, what is this? And the title was funny, so I just bought it. I don't even think I realized that it was a memoir. I thought it was a novel. But yeah, I really loved it. There's certain scenes from that book that I can remember with, a lot of clarity, or at least I think I can. It's been a long time, obviously. And I didn't read any more of Dave Eggers until I read his introduction to Infinite Jest, which really pissed me off at the time, because he was saying how, like, the book, like Infinite Jest, you can't read it while you're doing other things. You can't be, like, taking care of kids and reading this book. You can't be blah, blah, blah. Of course, I was reading it while I was on mat leave with 2 of my kids at home. So, like, fuck you, Dave Eggers. But I really like this book. I would like to know where my copy is, because I'd like to, revisit it one day. Okay, Persepolis, that's the graphic memoir about, I think it's growing up in Iran. I liked that one. It was sort of okay. I read it fairly recently. It hasn't really stuck with me that much though. Okay, and then down at number 24, we've got White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I only read that maybe 3 years ago. That made an appearance on a recent list of best coming of age novels, which seemed weird to me because it's got a lot of characters, and the characters that stick out to me in that book are the middle-aged characters, but I guess you could call it a coming-of-age book. It's not even really my favorite Zadie Smith. I think I like Swing Time better. I know there are a lot of Swing Time haters, but I really loved Swing Time. Okay, so that takes us through the first, like the top 25. So that, I've read a few of those just because like they were super popular books. They were everywhere. I wasn't reading with any rhyme or reason in the early aughts, so things that were popular were just more likely to I was more likely to come across them. So now I'm going to be doing a little more scrolling because there's a lot of stuff here. Like I said, there's another edition of that George R. R. Martin. There's Drowning Ruth, which, like, according to Goodreads, I say I've read, but like I don't think I have. I don't know. That's one of those books, that you just see a lot, and everyone owned one. It was an Oprah book, but I don't think I actually read it. Yeah, I've got some Lee Child. So Marion Keyes, Sushi for Beginners. I'm not sure if that's her first book. It might be, but I haven't read it. And this really makes me want to read it because I've read some of her later novels. Actually, only 2 of them, even though I say she's one of my favorite kind of like chick lit authors. But yeah, I haven't read Sushi for Beginners, and I'd really like to. I think that's sort of another classic of the genre. Just kind of scrolling, lots of stuff I haven't heard of. Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. I mean, I guess cozy mysteries were a thing back then. There's Philip Pullman, haven't read. Terry Pratchett, haven't read. There's some kids' books on here. There's something called On the Bright Side, I'm Now the Girlfriend of a Sex God, which sounds like YA except for the sex thing. So I don't know what that is. Keep on scrolling, see if there's not even, okay, so here's one I recognize, No Logo by Naomi Klein. I remember that being in stores. That's another one that had like big displays and stuff, but I didn't read it. It's one I'd kind of like to read, but I wonder how out of date it is now, like 19 years later. Okay, The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. I believe that won the Booker, I think, or maybe the Giller Prize, or maybe both. I remember, or maybe not. I did do this blog post that I'll link down below about what was like winning prizes and popular in the year 2000, which again is different from what people add to Goodreads, many years later. It was in response to an article I read about The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt. Came out in the year 2000, doesn't appear on this list. And someone saying like, it didn't find an audience, it didn't become popular because it was overshadowed by all these dude bro lit guys like Jonathan Franzen and David Foster Wallace specifically were listed as, people were paying attention to them rather than to Helen DeWitt, and that's, so I was like taking this real close look at who was actually popular and winning prizes in the year 2000, because like it wasn't, Jonathan Franzen wasn't even, like, no one knew who he was in the year 2000 unless you read the New Yorker a lot. The Corrections didn't come out till the next year, and David Foster Wallace didn't publish anything in the year 2000. Anyway, if you care about that, you can check out my blog post, but seems to me The Blind Assassin won something big, and maybe the Booker in that year. We've got The 4-Hour Body, An Uncommon Guide to Rapid Fat Loss, Incredible Sex, and Becoming Superhuman by Timothy Ferriss. He's like some podcast guy now, right? Like, okay. Okay, down at number 104, we've got Shop Girl by Steve Martin, which I have read and I did like. It seemed sort of gimmicky to me, the whole celebrity writing a novel thing. I think I read it for Novellas in November. It's very short, but I liked it. I don't remember, a lot of details about it at this point, but I do remember liking it. And then right under that is Portrait in Sepia by Isabel Allende, which is one of my 20 books of summer. That challenge is officially ending next week, but I won't be done by then, but I'm just going to keep going. So I will be reading Portrait in Sepia this year. The Danish Girl is on here. I didn't even know that was a book. I don't think. A lot of things with like, number 7 in a series, number 10 in a series. I don't know any of these. How Did Dinosaurs Say Goodnight? I know that one from my kids, obviously, years ago. They're too old for that now. Under the Skin by Michelle Faber's here. I'd like to read that one day. Four Blondes by Candace Bushnell. More series. More things I haven't heard of. There's an Umberto Eco book on here. Bodolino. The Beatles anthology. Was that a book? Okay. Yeah, I think we're getting down to the dregs here. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot more that I've read. There's an Anne Rice book on here that I haven't read. Just scrolling real quick. We're getting to the end. Yeah, no, there's nothing else. Nothing else here to talk about. But yeah, I guess it was kind of interesting going through this list. Obviously, you saw like most of the things I've read or heard of were in that top 25 because, you know, I was just kind of more into mainstream and popular things. Like, I mean, I still am. Most people are. But yeah, there is some catching up to do. I'd say probably the Marian Keys is the one I'm most interested in, honestly. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the ones I have read. I think 2000 was a pretty good year. And yeah, kind of fun to look back on. Like I said, what was a rather chaotic year after surviving Y2K. Things got a little crazy for a while, and yeah, we just had no idea what was to come. We thought we were in the future, right? We thought 2000 was going to be it, like when things changed, but yeah, not really. Anyways, that was my Choose the Year tag. I'll try to tag some people down below, but, you know, consider yourself tagged. Do your birth year, do a year that's significant to you, and I'll talk to you later.